Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Dada, with your 2024 AEW All In London Instant Analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back once again shortly after AEW All In went off the air to break down everything that happened on the brand's biggest pay-per-view of the year. We have results, we have grades, we have analysis, we have so much more coming your way over this program. But before we get to all of that, allow me straight off the top to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news analysis highlights, all of that good stuff. It is also where you can send in questions and comments for the show, and you can vote in pre- and post-show polls surrounding pay-per-views and premium live events. Tons of you did that around All In on Sunday, and we have WWE Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy both next week. So there's going to be 4 more polls that you can vote in, along with all the opportunities to send in questions and comments that we, of course, will read on the show. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You get bonus audio, instant reactions to all the major shows, and exclusive news posts. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Now, because this is an instant analysis, we do something special here on the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast. We crack open a cold one, and you're not going to hear a pop sound because I'm drinking a bottle. It is Southern Tier's French Toast Imperial Ale. Absolutely love this beer. I'll tell you real quick, Silver King is coming off a beer-infused weekend, let's call it, in the Tampa St. Pete area. Went to a beer fest. A ton of different breweries down there. I've been there many, many times, but a bunch of new locations. Want to shout out Magnanimous Brewing in Tampa, Florida, which is I don't want to say a wrestling-themed brewery. And by the way, I did not know when I attended, but they actually host wrestling matches regularly. And if you're into wrestling or heavy metal, they have some really cool beer names, some cool merchandise. So check out Magnanimous in Tampa. That is not a sponsored advertisement in any way. Vintage Chris Vanini is here on the show. Chris, what do you got over there?
I don't remember if I had this last time or not, but I've got a Sucker Punch watermelon Berliner from Three Nations Brewing in Texas. I think I mentioned the last time we've got a brewery opened up recently near us. So
I think so.
Got quite a few things from over there, and it's nice.
That does sound quite good. Now, look, we usually banter a little bit off the top here, but Vintage and I both very much want to get into your AEW All In instant analysis. So if you happen to be a first-time listener, what we're going to do is break down the entire main card, not so much in the reverse order of the way it was presented, but rather by what was most important. And that's the Silver King's decision, because after all,
This is my show. My show.
And then at the end, we will give you some final grades for AEW All In. We'll also discuss our expectation grades and how the final grades related to those. Just a reminder here, as mentioned off the top, WWE Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy are coming up next week. So if you love what you hear today, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Join us for those shows, in addition to our WWE and NXT Ultimate previews, which we do ahead of all premium live events and pay-per-views. But we're not here to talk about WWE. We are here to talk about AEW All In. And let's kick off where the show ended. The AEW Championship, Swerve Strickland defending against Bryan Danielson in a title versus career match. Danielson entered the final countdown. He got a tremendous response, even bigger than Will Ospreay in the same venue. Brie was ringside with their kids. Brie, I guess Garcia, Brie Bella. Some of you know her better, his wife. Swerve had rappers out with him. Bun B, the only guy I recognized. With the referee injured early, Prince Nana slid the ring bell on the apron. With Bryan taking a Death Valley driver into it. He bladed right away, sold his neck. Then Swerve stomped him right in front of Brie and the kids while talking trash to them. Danielson avoided him off the top rope, locked in an STF. Swerve came back with a countering rally into a flatliner. Danielson took him off the top rope with an avalanche tiger suplex. Bryan stomped his head in, locked in cattle mutilation. Swerve countered into a safely executed inverted bomb, but doctors stopped the match to check on Danielson, who took Swerve stomp for a false finish. 3 house calls followed for a shoulder lift 2.5. So Swerve delivered yes kicks that Bryan no-sold while staring at his family yelling, "I love you so much." Danielson twice smacked Swerve across the face, and he started an offensive run. Swerve completely no-sold a Bazaiku knee, didn't even fall down. He just stood there smiling in the corner, brushing it off his shoulder. Swerve hit a 4th house call and a JML driver, I guess it's now called Big Pressure, for another false finish. Fans chanted no as Swerve did the yes hand gestures. Hangman Page jumped over the barricade, shoved Prince Nana. A dozen security surrounded him as Bryan caught Swerve distracted with a Bazaiku knee for a false finish. Then he caught Swerve rolling with a second knee and hit a third to the back of the head before LeBell Lock was cinched in. Danielson prevented a break by snapping fingers, ultimately tapped out Swerve to win the AEW championship. And of course, there was a huge pop, major ovation. The family celebrated in the ring with the BCC as confetti and pyro all went off. And that was pretty much how the show ended. It did linger, but perhaps not as long as their competitor might have in the same situation. Extremely high quality match that basically went to expectation. It was telegraphed beyond belief that Bryan was winning the title here. I saw a lot of people thinking that he was really going to retire. I don't know where you got that from when they've pretty much laid out exactly what was going to happen. But that became even further apparent, as if that was possible, as the match transpired. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. I'm just explaining that it was very obvious that Bryan was going to win the title. Now, when it comes to breaking down the match, I'm fine overlooking individual moments that are not to my taste. But that entire sequence of Bryan taking house calls, Swerve not covering, then Bryan kicking out as if it was a normal move, then Swerve no-selling the Bazaiku knee, like not even falling to a knee or anything because of it, was taking it a bit too far for me. That's unfortunate because the rest of the match, from the wrestling to the storytelling to the emotion to the crowd reaction, I mean, it was almost perfect. Swerve's exceptional and successful first title reign, it was protected with the Hangman distraction. Also, the fact that he didn't get pinned. It's always funny to me how wrestling bookers believe tapping out, literally quitting, is a softer landing for someone than getting pinned, which is just you got knocked out for 3 seconds.
I was about to say that. I was confused.
I always think it's the other way, but wrestling bookers believe that it's better for people to tap out than get pinned. I guess because of pin. Well, I'm just saying you see it happen so frequently. It's like, oh, at least he didn't get pinned. He just tapped out. But it's like
I would have said if he passes out, if he doesn't tap out.
Well, I'm just happy they didn't do that because AEW overused the pass out finish for years, and they've lessened up on it recently, which is great. I've been criticizing that for years. So I'm glad they didn't do it. And I didn't mind the tap out. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying for a lot of wrestling promoters, they'd rather someone tap than get pinned because it's like, oh, it was just painful and they didn't want to do it versus they got beat clean 1, 2, 3 in the middle of the ring. There's something about that still means something, I guess, when it comes to wrestling. For some people, for me, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. It always has been. Bryan, though, showed a lot of fight and determination. He was motivated by his family. It all just worked for me, except for that one sequence. Was it a 5-star match? I mean, people put so much credence in that. My number of 5-star matches is finite, and my number of matches that go beyond 5 stars is even more exclusive. That's not how I grade. I don't go to a 8-star scale or whatever the case might be. I'm at 4.75 stars, A+. Easily the match of the night, not a question. One of my favorite matches of the entire year, will be in the match of the year conversation. Was it perfect? I would not call it perfect or beyond perfect, and I don't think that's a huge criticism.
I thought this was great. I thought this was my most enjoyable Swerve match and just whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he came out of this looking better.
He did.
Than at any other point as champion. Kind of the same way I feel about Damian Priest, honestly, in losing the belt to Gunther, is that they lost it in a way that was befitting a champion. And they did everything they could, and they just got beat by somebody else. And that's okay. That doesn't make you look weak.
Yeah.
Your point on not selling the knee, I didn't quite take it like that because he takes the knee, which I think Danielson missed because the camera cuts. I think he didn't get it high enough or Swerve didn't get low enough or whatever. because the camera cuts to pan back.
It did
But
cut. I
Swerve,
just thought that was a mistake on the cut. But go
right,
ahead.
Swerve. No, I'm thinking because Danielson didn't get all of it,
Mhm.
and so Swerve backs into the turnbuckle. He hits the turnbuckle, and you think he's gonna like fall over forward, and he doesn't, and that's when he stands. And when he did that, you could hear the crowd go, "Oh!" Like that, like whether or not it was a no sell, it was a moment that made Swerve feel like a big deal. And so I actually like that moment. You called them the yes kicks. I called them the world famous it kicks because they're named after the Miz. They weren't very good. I thought Swerve did not do a good job of those kicks. Miz, believe it or not, was actually better. I was one of those people that thought Danielson might lose. Maybe being a mark or whatever, but just because we knew he had neck surgery and stuff, and he said, he had told us, I think within the last year that he maybe had one full-time year left. And it was really good. Swerves. I would have, well, to get back to the point on the pin versus the tap, I would have preferred to end on a pin. I always prefer your big moments, your biggest shows, your final moments to be a 1, 2, 3.
Absolutely.
Because then the crowd knows to cheer at that exact moment, But Danielson, he won WrestleMania 30 with the tap. He wins this with the tap. I get it. It's his thing. I just always prefer the pin myself. But this was great. It was absolutely fitting of a main event at Wembley. Better than it was a year ago.
Yes.
And Danielson being champion needed to happen. It had to happen for reasons I explained on our Ultimate Preview, which was he's your most notable wrestler, maybe one of the greatest of all time. It hurts the lineage of AEW's World Heavyweight Championship if he never held it.
Correct.
Just like it hurt that Cody didn't hold it.
For him to wrestle that long in the company and never hold it and then retire, basically, wouldn't have made sense. Yeah.
Yes. And so I'm glad Danielson finally came around to doing it. I think it'll help everybody. This was great.
Yeah, they absolutely nailed this. Again, just because I had a critique doesn't mean I didn't like it. I loved it. It was fantastic. It was the best match on the show by a mile, as far as I was concerned. The emotion, the storytelling, the visceral reaction of the crowd, and I don't just mean in the finish, but the entrance. Brian's entrance was incredible. It's up for entrance of the year, despite it not being special in any meaningful way. Right? There wasn't a wrapper out with him. He didn't take a carriage to the ring. He didn't get a video game sponsorship. He entered.
Yeah. My biggest criticism, kind of not sort of along those lines, but it was stuff from Danielson that we'd seen before. We got the final countdown at Forbidden Door.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
Sure,
but man, imagine if this was the final countdown, like that. If this was the first time they saved that would have been really cool.
Yeah, if they saved it, it would have been special.
So yeah, exactly, and also he hurt his neck, the doctors come in spot.
Yeah, I try to stay away from. I criticize that all the time. I was going to stay away from it, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
He does that all the time.
I know.
It's the John Moxley bleeding spot. It's the Daniel Bryan hurt my neck or having a seizure spot. I hate it in general, but also they overdo it, and there was no need to.
Well,
they
did it twice.
Crimson.
They did it twice. So he bladed and sold the neck early, really early. And then they sold the neck again, where they stop the match and the doctor comes in and it's fake off the top. And by the way, that move was so safely executed. Like credit to Swerve.
Good on them.
Credit to Swerve and for Brian for doing that. They did that move safer moves that were executed worse in the Will Ospreay MJF match, just by direct comparison. So credit to Swerve for protecting Brian, in addition to the fact that they had a great match. But yes, when I saw that, I know I always say it on the podcast, so I was going to stay away, but you brought it up.
Because they do it every time.
They do it every
I don't understand
time.
why they have to do it every single time.
I know. He's cleared. It wasn't a bad move. Now, if he took it poorly and you want to hey, if, break glass in case of emergency, if something happens, we're going to oversell it. Sure. But when you do it every match, or every important match at least, it so loses the drama of seeing them come in the ring, because okay, they're just taking a break and he's totally fine.
It took me out of it. It took me out of it. It was totally unnecessary again, because the stuff that happened early on, you already bladed. That's good enough, man. It's great.
And by the way, they did it after Tiger Driver 91, I believe, because they were going to tell a story with that. So it was appropriate to do that. Here, really not the same thing. So I'll get off of it because I can rant about it forever. Now, in terms of where everyone goes from here, Chris, clearly Swerve Hangman is getting rematched again, perhaps as soon as All Out in 2 weeks. That should be a win for Page in theory. Swerve could try to regain the title at Wrestle Dream, given it's going to be in Washington. Darby Allin awaits Bryan next month in New York. That should be a great match. I don't see him winning the title, just given the way he was booked at All In. There's another number one contender that is a less exciting potential next champion, especially if he was the person to beat Danielson. If I had the pencil, I would probably have Hangman beat Danielson for the title. But right now, it remains to be seen what AEW is going to do.
Yeah, I think that all makes sense. Do you think, I had speculated before, do you think we get back to Swerve Danielson for Wrestle Dream in Tacoma?
Well, that's what I just said. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a possibility. The two big Washington guys, the passing of the torch in their home state makes a lot of sense. The question is, how do you get there? Maybe you have Swerve lose to Hangman at All Out. They're going to have to do, I guess, another tournament of some kind or a match of some kind to create a fourth number one contender or something. Once Darby has his match and the Casino Gauntlet winner, it's an opportunity to cash in at any time. So they're going to have to, I guess, maybe create a new number one contender. But again, if you have Hangman beat Swerve, then maybe Hangman should be the person to do it. Or maybe Hangman gets in that match and Swerve distracts him and gets a big pop. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I'm very curious to see. And this is what we always say about professional wrestling. If I leave your pay-per-view wondering what's going to happen on your next show, then you have succeeded. And I left AEW All In, maybe not in every single match, but when it comes to the world title, I left wondering what the hell are they going to be doing with Swerve and Hangman coming up Wednesday, and what's the trajectory of Bryan's title run? And that is what makes this successful.
Agree. The show itself was predictable in many ways, but
completely predictable. Yeah,
that's a good thing. Like WrestleMania is too, and then the fun is not knowing what happens next.
Sometimes predictable things are good, and in this case, in many parts of this show, that indeed was good. Let's move to the Women's Championship. Toni Storm defending against Mariah May. There was a lot of emotion here before the match. The crowd was super into it from the jump. By the way, this was second on the show. Mariah looked at Toni with disdain. Mira Shirakawa was watching from the crowd. May dodged a hip attack and powerbombed Toni through the ropes outside. Then she spit on Luther and slapped her own mother, who was watching from the barricade. Commentary told us that was despicable. For sure it was. I didn't understand exactly why she did it. Maybe I missed something. Maybe the mom said, don't do that. I don't know. Toni hit Storm Zero on the steel steps, then held May's mom against her own bosom. Mariah used this opportunity to blade, then she spit on Toni. She delivered 3 hip attacks. Toni countered with a lariat, German suplex, hip attack, and Storm Zero for a false finish. They low-blowed each other and did a double headbutt. Mariah did Mayday. Luther stopped her from using the belt. Storm stopped herself from using the shoe. May took advantage, hitting 2 awesome pump knees and Storm Zero to win the women's title. Massive reaction with May's family looking upset. And as much as I checked to see if I missed something, it appears I didn't. She just smacked the shit out of her mom because she's an unhinged asshole in kayfabe. And it's kind of weird, but it fits her character. Fans chanted for Storm after the bell. She writhed around on the canvas and walked out, kind of acting strange. We'll get back to that in a second. This may not have been, by definition, the second best match on the show, like from an objective quality standpoint. It was my second favorite match on the show without any question. The perfect ending, at least in this moment, given how the story was told. I'd like to hear why the Toni character, who was betrayed by this woman violently and vowed vengeance against her, I apologize for the alliteration, paused while attempting to use the shoe. I'm not sure why she would have any love left for her, given the attacks, given the fact that Mariah forced herself into her good graces and Toni at the beginning was hesitant to even accept her. But aside from that, the storytelling elements for the rest of the match added so much drama to what was already a high-quality wrestling match on its own. Perhaps this should have opened the show instead of run second. I also would have loved for it to get a little bit more time. It wasn't short. It just could have gone longer. I was enjoying it so much. Mariah was one of the top stars on the entire show. Toni too, but this was a star-making moment for Mariah May. 4.25 stars and an A.
Yeah, it's an example of the value of a really good story. Is that ultimately, if that's what people are into, you're less into every move by move. And I think there's other matches on the card where the opposite was the case, and that's why the crowd kind of acted the way it was in certain situations. Mariah May had to win this. She looks and feels like a star ever since she arrived. She's been doing a really good job. Everything here with her and Tony's been good. And the mom spot, like, I like the idea of the mom spot because, like, slapping your own mom to get to because you want to win the title or something is an incredibly heel thing to do.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of heat.
But
yeah.
you got to set it up. You
Right.
know, have her mom show up on the previous Dynamite or something like that, or just something. You're right. I was a little confused.
Or like she calls her
About that as
and you
well.
hear like through a speakerphone, Mariah, this isn't right. Tony took you under her wing. Shut up, mom. Hangs up on her. Then she's in attendance. She yells at her. Oh, you finally came to one of my shows. Slaps her across the face. Like just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. But it was great.
But yeah, but it was, yeah, and she slapped the hell out of her
Yeah.
too. So I thought this was all really good. Like it's such a good example of AEW finding somebody or getting a hold of somebody, Mariah May, putting the time in
Mm-hmm.
and creating a new like top level performer. Like perfect. They've executed everything with Mariah May incredibly well.
Yes.
And that's exactly how you do stuff like that. And you ultimately you get to your biggest show of the year and you crown a new star. Like just really, really well done. Match was solid. Tony Storm's been I love this timeless Tony Storm role. I don't know what's next for her. You threw out the idea of maybe she just goes by the decades and does something else. I think that'd be hilarious.
Like she's literally timeless. Like she moves on
Yeah.
with the time from when she started eventually to the present. That's what I was going to say. Sorry to interrupt,
Yeah.
but at the end of this match, it felt to me like she was teasing a gimmick change. Or like she doesn't know who she is or what she's doing. I wonder if we were spot on last week where we talked about, going like to the 50s and then the 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s. And eventually she gets maybe even to the present or the future, because you have to remember her rocker gimmick was very like 90s rock anyway. So you wonder maybe she even goes from 80s, skips over that, and then jumps to like a futuristic gimmick one day. And this is what they have planned for her over the next 3 or 4 years. Her being able to do the fashion and the character acting and all of that. It would take what is already one of the most unique gimmicks in wrestling over the last, decade or so, and push it even further to the top of that list. I mean, look, the timeless character, this iteration of it wore on me. I mean, at the beginning, it was cool. It wore on me. It got a little bit better. Then it wore on me again. I've been done with it for a while. But again, that's this version of it. And if they really do move to a 2.0, a 3.0, and a 4.0, then Tony has something really unique going here.
And it worked because she went all in on it. The production went all in on it.
Pun intended.
Graphics, the black and white, and pun not intended. And that's what makes gimmicks work. If the company believes in it, a lot of times fans will believe in it. So this was really well done. Everybody involved.
For me, the best AEW women's storyline ever, and one of the 3 best matches, and it might even be better than that. I enjoyed it so much, but it was a great conclusion to something they've worked really hard on for an extended period of time, and they deserve a lot of credit for that. Let's move to the actually International Championship. MJF defending against Will Ospreay. Ospreay got an Assassin's Creed sponsored entrance, which I presume is cool if you like that game. There were also a bunch of folks in black hoodies just randomly like flipping around him like they're supposed to be ninjas, except they were in athletic wear. To me, it simply reminded me of Ray Gun from the Olympics. I was just like, what are these people doing and why are they doing it here? If they were dressed as ninjas, cool. They weren't. It was odd and goofy too. This was announced for the American title. MJF came out in Uncle Sam regalia with an over-the-top Apollo Creed-like entrance. And he had Lex Luger-style tights as well. His Dynamite Diamond ring was announced stolen before the show, and they mentioned it on television. So I'm just prefacing. I assumed either Ospreay, Kyle Fletcher, or maybe Daniel Garcia would be in possession of it. Did you have any thoughts on the entrances, or did you hear that about the ring? And did you have any thoughts about that as well going into the match?
Yeah, the video game thing is kind of a letdown to me because I I'm always annoyed by that stuff when you have a big match, a match that I thought should maybe main event the show, and it's got a sponsor on it, and it's whatever. And it's a video game I don't really care for. Even when Kenny Omega comes out in his video game stuff that he's even just honoring, to me, it's kind of weird. But it wasn't I thought MJF's entrance was great. Really leaned into everything about that. And yeah, it was fun.
Some of Ospreay's gimmick and moveset is kind of loosely based on, I guess one of them is technically named for an Assassin's Creed move. So I got the parallel.
They did a good job. They did a good job
comparing
the two with the videos.
Well, I was going to say the opposite. I think it fit thematically, but I didn't think it was good. I don't think it was well done.
There's one where the assassin stabs somebody in the back, and then it cuts to Ospreay doing the
no that part. I meant the live component of it. The video was whatever. It was a promotional ad, and it was fine. The live component I just thought was awful. That's all.
Yeah, I didn't like the live component.
That's all I was saying. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that. That's my fault. MJF did the kangaroo kick after the bell. Ospreay pushed away from Heatseeker, hitting a phenomenal forearm. Will did a handspring tope earlier with MJF catching one later into a ringside tombstone pile driver. MJF yelled that anyone can flip, so he did a springboard that Ospreay avoided into 1/3 of a Spanish fly. Then he hit a draping shooting star press. I thought that was the best move of the first half of the match. MJF countered Stormbreaker into Crossroads. Then Ospreay countered a Brainbuster into Stundog Millionaire and 2 Oz cutters for a rope break. Will then took a pile driver straight onto his head. Really nasty spot. Ospreay came back with Stormbreaker and a delayed cover. MJF hit Panama Sunrise on the apron for a 9.8. That was pretty well done. Ospreay again avoided Heatseeker, hitting an Oz cutter on the apron. Then he tried Hidden Blade off the apron, but MJF ducked, and Will just drilled the cameraman. We heard the audible cue, which was kind of unfortunate in that moment. MJF grabbed the title as Ospreay worried about this random dude in the middle of a title match in his home country. Ospreay ducked one title shot, but took another as a counter to Hidden Blade for a false finish. Brainbuster for another false finish. MJF missed Hidden Blade on Will, who pushed Max into the referee. MJF teased Tiger Driver. Ospreay reversed it. MJF low blowed him. He grabbed a taped pair of brass knuckles from his trunks, or maybe it was something else entirely. It was just taped. It was weird. Only to get slugged by a man wearing black. It was clearly Garcia. Ospreay caught him distracted with Hidden Blade, and MJF was out cold. But before even trying to cover, he hit Tiger Driver 91 with zero hesitation for a delayed 1-2-3 to win the title. He refused to touch MJF's title, so Christopher Daniels slid into the ring and handed him the real International Championship. Now, this would have been the pop of the night, of course, if it wasn't for Danielson, given Ospreay was the hometown boy beating MJF. My first thought was, okay, maybe that ring really was stolen, because Garcia hitting him with the ring would have been absolutely perfect in that spot, but they didn't say that was the case, and I didn't see it on his hand. So I wonder if that was the original plan, and they just went with a regular punch. But it was a little bit odd because all he did was slug him one time, and shouldn't have affected him that much. Garcia showing up was not a surprise, but the crowd loved it. This was in the right spot as the mid-show main event, just given what was to come. Ospreay's star power was at its absolute peak in front of his hometown crowd. MJF sold the finish extremely well, didn't move from the middle of the ring for minutes. As far as the bell to bell, not my favorite. Never personally felt the drama. MJF was immensely over the top. You could argue more than he ever has been before the entire time. Ospreay went through his moves that he normally hits. Despite all the build for Tiger Driver, there was very little drama or indecision to him actually using it. He didn't even get into a must-use scenario. It wasn't like Ospreay had tried everything else and he couldn't put MJF away, so he went into his bag, grabbed the Tiger Driver, and used it on him to get the win. He had Hidden Blade. MJF was knocked out. He could have covered him theoretically for the 1-2-3, at least for something that would have been close. If he had done that and it was 2.9 and he was frustrated and he picked him up and did Tiger Driver without hesitation, or picked him up, thought about it for a second, shrugged, and did it anyway, that to me would have been so much better than just literally doing the move, this one move that he has been berating himself over for months upon months. You can't tell me Bryan Danielson, telling him shake it off on Wednesday or whatever he said to him, was enough for him to snap out of this mental state that he had for multiple months on end. That just bothered me. They built it up so much. I hated it. And in the end, he did the move, and it was just like any other move. The crowd did react, but it wasn't like it was some monumental moment on its own just using that move. The referee stuff was also an eye roll just because it gets used so frequently in big AEW matches. I mean, it happened in the main event. It happened in a women's match on the show. I think it happened one other time. I know what a certain someone graded the hour-long bout. I thought that was massively overrated. It was great, but it was massively overrated. This one probably will be too. I'm just happy both guys came out of it okay because they took some gnarly-ass head bumps. Overall, very fun match. Was it top 2 favorite on the show? No, it was number 3, but it was really high quality. 4.5 stars and an A.
Really solid match. It just goes back to what we said before, which was like the story for this never quite made sense. Like, why was the story about whether or not he wants to do the dangerous move against MJF, for the American / international title?
When the guy, by the way, that he quote unquote injured with it was fighting for the main title in the main event.
Yeah, he's fine. So
he was back 2 weeks later and he was wrestling in the main event. Yeah.
It made sense as a storyline against Danielson. It didn't really make sense as a storyline here. Because that was injuring MJF or not injuring him was not the story. I would have loved, I didn't know if the story was what, can MJF not beat him? He has to weasel out, or I had thought to myself when I was watching this, I was like, maybe the story is Ospreay says he's been the best in the world, but he hasn't been the best in America. And the American champion is AEW's biggest star in America. And this is his time and he wants to so in winning it, he's just kind of doing it for the fans and just lean into that instead of MJF is arguing America's great, and
no, he's not. He's actually not. He hates America. He likes Long Island, but he's the American champion. That was his gimmick.
He's arguing that America's better than England, and Ospreay's responding with, "Should I not do the move that injures people?" Right? There was just a disconnect of a story there, and it's why their go home promo never quite connected. Just make it simple. Make it have Ospreay in America cutting promos about how he's been welcomed since he came to America and he loves it here and he's been fighting for English fans. He wants to fight for American fans too and prove that America's better than MJF and what he represents.
Sure.
Simple stuff. And then you have to kind of twist it as you get to England and do that whole thing. But that was my disconnect. I was like, why are they doing this? But I thought the match was really solid. These two guys are your foundation of the company, I think, and will be for a very long time. So you can always come back to do various things. But I guess so. The American title is done now. That was kind of a short-lived thing. I was kind of coming around on it because I like the title. But
no, I wasn't a huge fan. I just find it funny, by the way. Everyone talks about the pillars of AEW. The real pillars of AEW are MJF, Will Ospreay, Swerve, and Hangman Page. And it's not the other guys. And they can keep saying it's the other guys. It's not.
Well,
for the men, by the way. There's women, there's female pillars too.
Day one is guys, but yeah.
I'm just saying there's female pillars as well. But I'm saying for the men, it's those 4 I just mentioned. If you're talking about building a competitive company, it's those dudes. It just is.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. We got the TBS Championship, Mercedes Moné against Britt Baker. Moné came out in a carriage filled with corgis. Slow start involving Camille distractions. Mercedes hit 3 amigos and drove 2 knees into Britt's back. She had a turnover just to make that happen. Moné did an avalanche body slam, which was really cool. Mercedes then tried to counter a stomp into a power bomb, and Britt tried to counter something off the ropes into a cutter. Both were supposed to get huge pops. Neither was executed well, and the crowd clapped. Baker did a couple sling blades and fairy tale ending before grabbing the glove. Next was an air raid crash, and then a flip out of another air raid clash into money. Next was an air raid crash, and then a flip out of another air raid crash into Moné Maker, which was countered. Moné hit backstabber and then tried another avalanche body slam, countered into what was supposed to be a Spanish crossbody. They got most of it. Baker got the stomp, but Camille slid Mercedes' foot under the bottom rope and gave her a title. That referee caught Moné trying to use it, and Baker pulled an Eddie Guerrero, hitting the canvas with Camille on the apron, getting the heavy ejected. Risky and kayfabe, that could have been a DQ with her as challenger, but nevertheless. Baker then hit Panama Sunrise and the stomp for a false finish. Mercedes bit Britt's hand to prevent lockjaw, and they were supposed to get their arms intertwined so Moné could stand up out of that and hit her finisher, but they were potentially locked in the wrong direction. So Mercedes had to break it, put her back in the arm lock, and hit Monet Maker for the clean title retention. The match plan, okay, the way this was put together was most likely way better than the execution. The finish was frustrating. Baker, despite her talents, those that she has, is not a great dance partner for the top women in this division. These two and their agent, they did well in planning the sequences. The match was put together nicely. With a better performer, this might have been special. But man, everything Britt does is like slow motion. It's like she wrestles underwater. Even though there were some strong move sequences, few of them were truly impactful. Mercedes did her best to carry the match. The finish was somewhat nonsensical from the standpoint that Camille was introduced as a heavy weeks ago. She not only fails to help in the finish, meaning cheat to help Mercedes retain, but the distraction doesn't cost Britt either. So Mercedes just straight up beat her clean in the end of the match. Why would you put in all these other elements if you're just going to have Mercedes beat a returning Britt Baker clean at the end? I'm at 3 stars B-, and I got to be honest, I think I might be generous. I think I'm being like kind of light on this.
It was a letdown just because I had really high expectations for it. Like these are your 2 biggest stars, so to speak. And a year ago, Mercedes was here, but not wrestling. And, we've seen Britt put on good matches and when they can really get into it, but I just didn't sense chemistry here. And your point that nothing was really impactful, I think that's my biggest takeaway. They were kind of doing moves to each other, but not like hurting each other as much. And it's also why the finish was flat, because the Monet Maker is a terrible finish.
Terrible.
It's impossible to make it look impactful. It's so much twist and movement. It's 100% reliant on the person to sell it, and it's a difficult move to sell. And so she gets the 1, 2, 3, and there's like no reaction because everybody's like, "Oh wait, that's it." Like we were expecting some epic clash between these two, and instead it was just it never got past second gear, which is too bad because I think they're both really talented and everything. The thing we're gonna remember most about it is Mercedes' entrance and the corgis, and all that, which was cool to see. But
is it corgi, not corgi? Am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, corgi.
Corgi. Okay.
Yeah. It's just unfortunate that it happened with the CEO theme. So,
I know she has one. She has a corgi named Ryu Maivia, which I you can say what you want about Mercedes. I love that name for a dog. I mean, Ryu from, I presume, Street Fighter, and Maivia, of course, Rocky Maivia, The Rock, and the entire Maivia family. I've always popped for that. I think her dog's super cute. I don't think her dog was one of the corgis, though. I mean, maybe it was. Maybe she has others, and it was all them. Maybe there were some stunt dogs in there. I'm not sure. But I wanted more information, and that was not provided to me, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All right, let's move from the TBS Championship to the TNT Championship. Jack Perry against Darby Allin in a coffin match. This was the penultimate match on the show. Darby glued thumbtacks to his face and was sure to tell us in the camera they're real fucking thumbtacks when he first used them. I actually thought it was super inventive, despite the ridiculousness of like him screaming at us in the camera, telling us they were real.
It looked cool. It looked cool.
They looked awesome. He also flipped us off twice, and it was probably the 6th or 7th time a wrestler gave the middle finger either to the crowd or to another wrestler during the show. I think in totality, it was 8 to 10 times on this show. Darby stood the coffin on its side and just did a tope suicida into it. He missed Jack. Jack poured out real glass from a bag as predicted. The fans popped for it. They chanted, "Fuck CM Punk," because, of course, Darby started bleeding and got his wrist taped, then still was able to hit a coffin drop outside despite that. Jack then took the belt off of Darby and tied his legs together, shoving him off the stage into a couple of tables. Then he brought over a body bag, zipped him up just like the good old days, dragged him over to the coffin. Jack kept spamming the Raven signature move with the arms out. He did it 1,000 times. And Darby sits up in this body bag, which was zipped up. So somehow he was able to get his head through it just by moving around, I guess. He poked his head out. He ate a running knee from Jack. Then Jack spit on him, closed the lid, and retained the title. The Young Bucks then brought out a gas can and doused the entire casket in it, only for Sting to save. Entering to seek and destroy. Massive, thunderous pop, of course. Sting dominated the Bucks with double Scorpion Death Drop. Jack tried hitting him with a chair. Of course, Sting no-sold it. and Perry ran away. This was definitely a match. The right finish, as predicted by me during our Ultimate Preview, and yet not a great look for Darby from the standpoint of the number one contender to the AEW title getting outsmarted and out-extremed by Jack while losing squeaky clean and also needing to be saved by his big brother Sting once again. Obviously, using Sting here was great for the live crowd at the biggest show of the year. So I don't hate that decision to factor him in. But if you took a second to think about it, it really was not the best look for Allen as a competitor. Plus, what was a tiny bag of glass going to do to Darby when this dude threw himself 20 feet down to his death through an entire plane of glass just a few months ago? My expectations were way, way, way too high for this match. I'm at 2.75 stars, C+, and that doesn't mean it was bad, but holy shit, nothing happened and Darby looked like an absolute joke after years of being built up.
Well, years of being built up, opinions can differ on that. I mean, technically he has. I've never been a Darby guy. I don't think he's
been booked very strong constantly.
But in my mind, he hasn't been elevated or
he was elevated above getting, I don't want to call it squash because that's not a correct terminology, getting the shit kicked out of him by Jack Perry without any interference or any reason for that happening.
And I say that because compare that, I know he's a number one contender, but compare Darby and kind of what he's been in AEW to the guy he just lost to, Jack Perry, who I'm loving right now. This whole scapegoat thing, like, I'm digging it. I think he's doing great work. Okay. The beard looks good. Like, not saying it's the best thing in the world, but like, he's interesting. And Darby Allin's just not interesting to me. And so I was, when this was the second to last match to go, and it was this came after Ospreay, MJF, right? Or was it after Mercedes?
This was the penultimate match after Mercedes and Britt.
Yeah, so it felt like in my mind, I was like, oh, AEW's not just doing the second biggest match before the biggest match. They're trying to pace it a little bit. And so my expectations went down once I realized where this match was on the card and what was happening. And then it was just kind of whatever. Sting coming back and doing a spot was cool. It was fine. I think Jack Perry came out of this looking pretty good. Darby Allin, I'm like, number one contender. Okay.
I think Jack Perry came out of this looking stronger. I wouldn't say he looked good. You had your AEW diehard fans chant "fuck CM Punk," and then your CM Punk fans chant CM Punk in response. Jack was the third most important person in this match. By that, they were cheering for Darby, they were chanting for CM Punk, and Jack was there and he won the match.
Yeah,
that's what happened.
Yeah.
I'm just being
I agree.
I'm just being candid. And yes, he destroyed the number one contender, a Daredevil, who's the number one contender for the AEW title, in his signature match. That is strong booking for Jack. And credit where that's due. Thumbs up. They're going with this guy. And if you're going to put all your win behind his sales, then you got to do shit like this. Did Darby need to look that bad when he has a title match coming up in 4 weeks? I don't know. I don't think so. Let's move to the Trios Championship. The Patriarchy defending against House of Black, the Bang Bang Gang, and then a trio of Pac, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta in a London ladder match. Now, that ladder trio, LATTER, won the wild card match on Collision. The Patriarchy attacked after the bell, so the other two teams saved, and they had a show-ending brawl on Saturday night. This opened the show. A lot of fun in parts with Christian Cage playing chicken, trying to only climb the ladder while everyone else actually fought. The Guns tried to do the Dudley Boys get the tables gimmick because apparently all they can do are Attitude Era WWE references. Then they chased Shayna Wayne off a ladder. She tried to climb. Nick did Wayne's World off the ropes through a table outside. Christian stopped Killswitch from climbing because he wanted the glory. The Guns hit 310 to Yuma and yelled, "Suck my dick." This is at the start of the show, by the way, first match. Claudio and Brody King climbed with the Guns on their back before falling into stereo table spots that were set up seconds earlier. Wayne then flew out of the ring for a Tope Suicida Canadian Destroyer on Brody King into a table, easily the spot of the match. Christian then caught Pac with a chair to the head and Killswitch. Yuta got caught with the hairspray from Shayna and beaten with a chair into a ladder on his back. Juice Robinson held up a chair to block the spray and then sprayed it in Shayna's face. Luchasaurus stopped him as he teased a powerbomb of her through a table. and Juice just swan dove himself off the apron into that table after a light kick from Luchasaurus. Christian speared Buddy Matthews off the ladder into a table, but banged his head really hard. Luchasaurus still grabbed and assisted him up the ladder. Pac ran in from the other side and kicked Cage off into the dinosaur to strip one title and get the win. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of needing to only take down one of the 3 titles, but it was still a moment, and he was the person the moment was set up for. Massive ovation for the hometown guy winning the title. That's always been the planned booking for this match, except it was supposed to be with Death Triangle instead of BCC. I wonder if it all transpired this way because other booking plans had to be adjusted for them, or if it was all just convoluted because that's the way they put it together after the fact. There was no real reason given as to why Pac was with BCC other than their prior history of feuding, from the best that I could tell. But sometimes you just got to make it work. That's what it felt like happened here. Bunch of moves here. Not a match I would call special, but there were some individual moments that were fun. 3.75 stars, B+.
Quick correction. Not a hometown guy for Pac, the home countryman.
Countryman, yeah. It's hometown, same thing.
He's from Newcastle upon Tyne,
sure.
Which is very different than London. I was happy for
Look,
Pac.
if you can call a New Zealander's home Australia, I can say that someone from Newcastle is from London. I'm talking about England and Great Britain. Come on, you know what I'm talking about.
So like I was happy for Pac, but I was surprised I didn't pick him to win because I was like, well, they're not a real trio. And
well, we didn't know who would be in the match anyway, so we didn't know that he'd be there.
Yes, yeah. So, good for him. He's someone who he's so much stop and start in AEW, whether it's injuries or COVID or what have you. This was a fine, fun show opener if you're not including 0 Hour. You know, we've talked, the trios division is just kind of there right now. Don't really know where it's going or what it's going to be. The trios and the tag divisions really need to be figured out. But I enjoyed it. It was fun.
All right, let's move to the Casino Gauntlet for a future world title match. Orange Cassidy entered at 1. He's now wearing black jeans and a black shirt instead of regular jeans and a white shirt because he's depressed and pouting. Kazuchika Okada, a champion, was number 2. Nigel McGuinness got a massive pop and chant at number 3 for his first match in nearly 13 years. It was awesome to see him out there. Really cool moment when he fought Zack Sabre Jr., who came in at 5. Hangman Page cleared house a bit later. At this juncture, there seemed to be no sense of urgency despite the real unique rules of this match. And if you don't know what they were, it's whoever scores the first pinfall or submission wins. Doesn't matter how many people enter. Once you get that 1, 2, 3, you win. Then Ricochet debuted, coming from WWE as expected, getting a great reaction and pyro. Same look, but he was wearing gloves, and he was literally wearing AEW colors, which commentary was sure to point out because he loves AEW now that he signed to AEW. Jeff Jarrett hit Hangman with the side of a guitar, not the flat part of it, which looked really nasty. Business finally picked up briefly with Ricochet doing some of his stuff. Nigel hit a Tower of London and some pinning combination counters. And then all of a sudden, Luchasaurus entered. He twice looked like he was going to hurt Christian Cage, who, by the way, also entered this match. And instead, he simply chokeslammed Kyle O'Reilly. And then he threw Christian on top of him for the 1, 2, 3. Roderick Strong and Mark Briscoe were also in the match, by the way. This was an immense disappointment. Nigel and Ricochet entering the ring were legitimately the best parts of the match. It was completely different from the first iteration of the Casino Gauntlet on that Dynamite. I believe it was at Daly's place, right? Where it was like a frenzied car crash. Everyone trying to hit major moves and get that pinfall as soon as possible. Crazy sequences drove the crowd wild. People were saying, this needs to be AEW's signature match. They need to do this, once or twice a year. And this is so incredible. This felt like a Royal Rumble where people entered and just waited. It was antithetical to what made the Casino Gauntlet so popular. And ending a match involving that much talent with Luchasaurus chokeslamming Kyle and Christian winning was the definition of a wet fart. It was extremely, extremely disappointing. Even if it was great for Nigel to get a moment and super cool that Ricochet is now in AEW. I saw people calling this a great match. When did that happen exactly? There were a bunch of moves that we've seen a million times, but not even one moment where it seemed like the match might end in exciting fashion. Ricochet flipping around is great, but it resulted in nothing. And it wasn't like he broke things out of the bag he had not been doing. He wasn't breaking out of a box or anything like that. He was doing his stuff. The surprises were super fun, but surprises on their own don't make a match great. That's not moves and drama and storytelling. It's mostly just entrances. And really, I think I may have said this on a recent show. When the fuck is Luchasaurus going to turn on Christian? Like, I know it's still going to get a pop whenever it happens. I know. But this is ridiculously dragged out at this point. 3 stars B-. I think I'm being generous. This will be heavily overrated. I promise you.
Real quick, Luchasaurus first joined Christian at the Blood and Guts I went to in Detroit with my dad like 3 years ago? 2 years ago? Crazy. Like, it is weird that it happened. So, like, I loved this.
Wow. Okay.
Until the end. And it killed so much of it. I didn't quite understand the rules.
That was 2022, by the way. It was 26 months ago. Go ahead.
Yeah. I didn't understand the rules. The time intervals were not
inconsistent time intervals.
They were inconsistent. But it kept the best parts of a lot of Royal Rumbles are when they give you the one-on-ones and everybody kind of clears out. Oh, we got Goldberg and The Undertaker face to face, or Brock Lesnar and Keith Lee, or like, and that's exactly what this setup did, because guys can be thrown out of the ring. You set up a ton of these moments. Nigel Okada, Nigel Zack Sabre Jr., Ricochet, whoever. Like there were a lot of those. And it was really cool because like there were a lot of guys in this match who kind of never got their big moment in WWE or never got to finish it. And there were a lot of guys in here who did get that. Nigel, Mark Briscoe, just several guys. And so like, it's like cool to see a lot of these guys get. I know AEW is kind of doing the Wembley moment thing. Or whatever,
the people
like that,
in the
like,
match, I have no issue with anyone who was in the match. I thought it was great.
Right. And so like,
it was great.
It constantly kept my attention. It's like, oh man, it's cool to see this together, this and that. And it's cool to see a whole stadium cheering all these people. But then as it went on, I was like, I'd forgotten what the rules were. I was like, wait, who's the last person? And then it just ended. And I was like, oh, that's it. And it did really take away from the whole thing. Like, all you got to do to fix this is just say there's 20 guys.
Well, no, because that's what makes it unique. The whole thing that makes it unique is the fact that it's an endless list of entrants, but it can end at any time. It can end with 4 entrants. It can end with 9, 12. That's why people loved it so much. But my point, Chris, is, okay, yeah, I mean, occasionally they would go for a pinfall, but the initial match when they did this on Dynamite, I believe it was at Daly's place, if memory serves, it was so chaotic because they were hitting big moves constantly for like 20 minutes, and maybe not every pinfall, but 33% of the pinfalls at a minimum. You thought, oh my God, this might end the match. And there was great star power, and it was super athletic, and it was great. And it's okay that this match was a little bit different, but to take away the urgency of winning, this was for a world title. This was not, oh, cool, Nigel's back. Oh, cool, Ricochet's back. Like, that shouldn't have been the only thing it was about. Like, imagine if you got to the Royal Rumble and number 30 comes out and it's Edge, and everyone's just there like, holy shit, it's Edge. That's great. Like, we forgot that we're challenging for a number 1 contendership right now. They should have been, when Nigel got in there, it should have been a great moment, and then everyone goes after him. Or, he tries to start pinning Zack Sabre Jr. as soon as Zack gets in the ring. There was only one sequence, I think it was Zack Sabre and Orange Cassidy, where they were actually going for pinfalls consistently. And I was like, oh, I know the match isn't going to end here, but at least they're trying. They didn't do that for the majority of the match. The whole point of the match is it can end suddenly at any given time, and you should be trying to get a pinfall submission as soon as possible.
Which is why I say I would kind of prefer a Royal Rumble that ends in a pinfall, which is sort of what they did with this. But then if you just make that tweak, I think everything else they did would have been fine.
Or if you just book the match properly and have people try to pin and submit each other.
I don't think that type of match can work like long term.
It did. I mean, dude, it was.
They did it. You can't. But like, it doesn't work in a stadium. It's too quick for. I didn't like that first one as much as everybody else seemed to.
Okay.
I really liked what they were doing here.
Okay.
And then it just ended, and I hated the way it ended. I'll also add Orange Cassidy. I don't think you mentioned this, but his entrance when he came in, that was Mr. Bean, the old comedy show that he did.
What was Mr. Bean?
Orange Cassidy.
What was Mr. Bean though? What do you mean?
The entrance with the light coming down, and then he
Oh yes, I didn't know that. Oh, with the logo on the thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, cool.
That was Mr. Bean
That's
back
cool.
in the day. Ricochet. Let's talk about Ricochet for a second.
Talk about Ricochet. Go ahead.
So glad he's here.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan. I really didn't like the way commentary handled this one.
Oh, terrible.
Because he comes out and they're just saying the rumors are true. We heard all the rumors. Man, what about those rumors? And I'm like, if I don't like just tell me how big of a deal he is and how great it is and how talented it is. They eventually got there when he started doing the moves, but I'm not listening to commentary at that point. I'm focused on the moves he's doing. It was a very weird moment to not just be like, Ricochet's in AEW. This guy is one of the most talented wrestlers we've ever seen. And the way commentary handles a lot of things, they just like have conversations with each other. And it was just like it was very weird. I did not think commentary was good on the show.
It was terrible. I always harp on them, especially the wrestlers, for this is where the best wrestle, and saying it a million times. If there was an appropriate place and time to do it, it's when Ricochet's debuting. Wow, the AEW really is where the best wrestle. We have Ricochet now. Like that's a good opportunity to go ahead and say that. You're right, though. He came down and it was like, oh my God, is it really him? Yes, it is. It's Ricochet. And he goes into the ring. It's like, who is he?
What if you didn't hear any rumors?
Think about the way Tama Tonga.
If you're not online, you have no idea what the heck they're talking about.
Think about the way Tama Tonga debuted in WWE and Corey Graves putting this guy over as a villainous dude in New Japan who couldn't get his way into WWE. He couldn't believe that he was there. How did this happen? How did Solo Sikoa get him there? You knew immediately this guy's real.
He's dangerous.
Yeah. He's a criminal, I think he called him. One of the problems with Ricochet is he doesn't really have a character except for that he's high flying and really exciting. You know, that could be part of it too. But you're right. It wasn't sold well. And this is a larger conversation for another time. I am so far out on AEW commentary. I like Taz. I don't think I like really anyone else. I like Nigel when he's a heel and he has a competent person going up against him.
I like Nigel.
But dude, I mean, the color commentary is fine. The play-by-play and the people who run the shows, it's super rough, man.
Yeah, agree.
It's real rough. All right, let's move to the tag team championship. The Young Bucks defending against FTR and the Acclaimed in a triple threat match. Unfortunately, this used the far inferior triple threat tag team rules with only 2 men legal. FTR dressed like the Hart Foundation because, of course, they did. Bunch of blatant choreography early. FTR hit Shatter Machine. The referee got pulled out of the ring, and Billy Gunn took a super kick. Max Caster assisted using the EVP trigger and Shatter Machine consecutively. Acclaimed 8 double mule kicks. The referee was distracted, even though it's a no DQ by rule. It's a triple threat. Then they did another referee distraction, also unnecessarily, to use a title. Billy hit a famouser right in the middle of the ring, right in front of the referee. He didn't care about that. Dax Harwood took a belt shot after a roll-up kick out, but he kicked out of that, only to eat an EVP trigger with the Bucks retaining the titles. Grizzled young vets then confronted after the bell, but the Bucks dipped out and they attacked FTR instead. They're not major stars, and okay, maybe it was a casual crowd, but they're still notable British wrestlers, and there was shockingly little reaction to them. Even commentary didn't sell it well. We just talked about that. Legitimately terrible debut after real weak TV work previously in AEW. Now, I got a late start on All In. I actually watched the final 3 hours and then went back and watched the first hour. So this was the first match I watched. And man, was it underwhelming. It felt like everyone was moving in quicksand. Caster doing both finishers was fun. It was the highlight of the match. Not that unique. The referee distraction spots were simply stupid. The finish was rather uninspired. And given what we have seen all 3 of these teams accomplish in the ring against each other and against other teams, it's simply underdelivered. This was a TV main event, if anything. Keeping the titles on the Bucks was sensible. We discussed that on the Ultimate Preview. Given their gimmicks would literally be nothing if they were no longer champions. That's why I predicted them to retain and Jack to retain, and that's exactly what happened. Neither contender would have been fresh or exciting as new champions. AEW badly needs to fix its tag team division, and that includes moving people down from trios into tag teams so they can wrestle here. Look, if they changed the titles, it wouldn't have been exciting. The Bucks retaining wasn't exciting. The match really wasn't that good. 2.75 stars, C+.
We're getting kind of negative here. I'm going to say some positive things to start.
About this? Okay.
Yes. The "Scissor Me Daddy" chant for all of Wembley.
That was cool. Yeah.
That was cool.
That was awesome.
That was hilarious.
Yeah, that was
I
awesome.
thought it was really funny. I didn't understand Caster's rap. The audio was not great. I caught some of it. It was kind of hard to clear. It sounded like it was pretty good. I got a pretty good reaction from the crowd. And I thought this started okay, but it's another one. It never really kind of got into that next gear. I had been wondering, like, hey, when are we going to get like a real classic Young Bucks match? We haven't had that in a long time. And this wasn't that either. And so I thought it was fine. It was okay. And the Grizzled Young Vets point, they debuted on April 27th on Collision. They lost to the Acclaimed.
Yep.
And that was it. They again, if you plan these things, if they had never been in AEW, and they show up at the end, it would have been something. Not amazing, but it would have been something like, oh, Grizzled Young Vets are in AEW. That's crazy.
You tease it on social media. They take a picture of Wembley Stadium.
Instead, as soon as they show up, Shivani or somebody was like, oh, we saw them on Collision a few months ago. What? What?
Right.
Who cares? Just pretend it didn't happen or something. So, that was another example of commentary kind of letting it down instead of hyping it up as a big thing. So,
and by the way, if they had come in and it looked like they were going to attack the Bucks, but the Bucks stayed in the ring and they attacked FTR, and the Bucks laughed and gave them elite shirts, and they actually were building a faction or something and getting a bunch of minions to do their dirty work, there might be something there, but they didn't.
Yeah, it was just something thrown in at the end. It was too bad. So I thought this was okay. It was, I didn't expect this to be great because the Young Bucks haven't been great in a while, but yeah, it was what it was.
I think all the tag team matches leading into this were better than this match, or at least equal. And yeah, you're supposed to be building to the best match on the show. And that certainly did not happen here. Let's go to the FTW Championship. Chris Jericho defending against Hook. FTW rules. The stipulation here is that Hook could not challenge for the title again and must leave the Jericho Vortex if he loses. Hardly punitive stipulations. Hook beat Big Bill on Collision with Red Rum, though it was crazy because I believe this was in Cardiff, Wales, or it was definitely in Wales. Bill was getting cheered over Hook throughout the entire match on Saturday night. I thought that was pretty interesting. So Fozzy played out Jericho, who wore an orange suit to shoot on Taz, and he sang his own lyrics. I guess he can now say he has played Wembley Stadium twice. Hook got his dad's old intro with the heartbeat gimmick, but ultimately came out to his regular entrance. He had Kinzio tape over his eye, which I don't know if it's supposed to be used for that, but that's what they did. It's a little bit odd.
Use the rap. I'm always saying stop using use rap. Make him look like an old pirate or that guy from Game of Thrones who had one eye and had the rap over his eye. Wrestlers, go back to rap, especially when it's a fake injury.
Or an eye patch. Didn't Bryan Danielson use an eye patch? It's fine.
He did.
The Kinzio tape over the eye it's not the usage of that. I mean, it's so weird. The Learning Tree attacked him 3-on-1, given the lack of rules. He kicked out of a code breaker at 1. He threw the other 2 out of the ring. Jericho poured out cricket balls and took a back suplex, missing every single one of them. Hook brought out a cricket bat and hit the Learning Tree with it. Hook then started hitting and throwing cricket balls. The tree attacked again. Hook prevented a suplex into a barbed wire board on a table, but got blinded and then hit with a trash can. Yet he was able to duck seconds later 2 Judas effects. Then he removed the eye tape and exclaimed, "I can see." So why would you wrestle half of a match blinded when you're already outnumbered and you wait until your other eye is hurt to show that you can see? Hook avoided a pool cue shot. Bill fell backwards into the barbed wire table. Keith hit Hook with Martha Hart's belt. I have no idea why he would have that, or commentary would point that out. Hook put Jericho in Red Rum. Taz left commentary to put the Taz mission on Keith, and Jericho tapped out for the title change. Taz got a huge pop. Hook got cheered loudly for winning back the only title he's ever held in AEW, which is not actually a title. Ultimately, Hook beat the Learning Tree 1-on-3. The heels looked like idiots. 2.5 stars. C, the FTW title needs to be retired.
They did. Remember, it was Hangman had an eye patch.
Hangman
not
had
that
one as well.
long ago.
Yes.
And he also did the thing where, oh, my eye is okay.
But I think he did it early-ish in a match. Like after a couple of minutes to be like, haha, I can see F you. And he was a babyface. You don't do it well after you're getting your shit kicked in 3-on-1.
Moxley also had an eye patch at one point.
Wow, they've done a lot of eye patch gimmicks.
Julia Hart's had an eye patch. I'm just search AEW eye patch and you see a lot of wrestlers who
I forgot.
Also,
I forgot these.
Yeah.
That's true. Did Malachi Black also? No, I don't know. He might have.
That sounds familiar.
You keep talking. I'll Google it.
So like this, I didn't understand from the beginning. I was like, so we're just doing a 1-on-3 the whole time? And Big Bill kept doing cool stuff. And the crowd was really into Big Bill. And when they're really into Big Bill, you're not as into Hook, you know? And so it's just like, and the crowd was dead for this, except for anything Big Bill did. And then Taz at the end.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool of Taz to do that in whatever. A cool little moment. But again, like Darby Allin, like to me, Hook he's not going anywhere. He hasn't been going anywhere for a while.
Long time.
He's been the exact same character. He hasn't grown. He doesn't do anything differently. He's still going after this same title that's whatever. Jericho doing the I'm the Learning Tree
live
over the live. That was cool. I popped for that.
Yeah.
I still like that bit. It's funny. And though just coming out smiling, it was fine. It was funny. But yeah, this is just, this is one of the things I was least looking forward to. We knew who would win and we knew it wouldn't be very good. And yeah, for Hook to just beat all of them is pretty rough look.
Malachi Black never had an eye patch in AEW. Aleister Black had an eye patch in WWE. And then he did, he kind of, when he joined, he did the eye gimmick in AEW, kind of continuing that part of the story that he had. So it wasn't in AEW, but close. At least I remember that's something that happened. Yeah, no, I agree with what you said. I don't really have anything to add about Hook and Jericho. Now, unfortunately, I did not have the ability to watch the 0-hour matches, so I will discuss those on Thursday's show, which will be our NXT No Mercy Ultimate Preview and our full breakdown of everything from AEW television this week. Apparently, Jamie Hayter returned and had hair just like Becky Lynch, and that was a big thing. People criticizing that. Why? I don't care about the hair necessarily, but why she would return on 0 hour when fans have been waiting nearly 2 years for her to come back. I cannot explain that. Why you just throw her on a pre-show. And while I'm not criticizing the hair because multiple women can have the same color hair, that's fine. I did see a picture and I will straight up say she looked much better and much more unique with the black and blonde hair than just being another redhead in wrestling. So I think it's a downgrade, but I don't think she's trying to be Becky Lynch.
Yeah, no, I know you'll watch it, but I'll just explain. Essentially, Saraya came out with her people and talked about. And credit to comment, they were like, "Wait, why is Saraya out here? This isn't scheduled." So Saraya comes out with like her family and everything, and just talks about how she's the best and she won the title at All In last year. She's not on the show, and then Jamie Hayter's music hit, and crowd went nuts.
So it would have been like an intermission segment. They could have done it maybe after the Ospreay match, maybe, and it could have been a breather for 5 minutes.
Well, we'll talk. I want to get to that in a second. Breathers and whatnot. But
sure.
Yeah, and then Jamie hit her. She didn't even hit her move on Saraya. She hit it on, I forget, the girl who's always
Harley Cameron.
Yeah. I was like, okay, whatever. But that told me, because remember we had thought, hey, maybe Jamie Hayter shows up, helps Britt Baker win, costs Britt Baker something. And when that happened, I was like, well, one, I know she's not coming out in the other match now, and two, can't believe we did this for 0 hour again. Treat your Jamie Hayter was a star when she got hurt.
Oh yeah.
Treat your stars like stars. Yeah, she got to come back at Wembley, but how many people really saw it? And that was frustrating.
People waited 2 years. The people have been clamoring for her to come back. If WWE did that, they returned someone on a kickoff show, they'd get lambasted for it. And I got to see it, and I'm still, with the way you describe it, it sounds like a fine return segment. If they don't want her to work with Britt Baker because they're on the outs a little bit, that's fine. But they could have done that segment, it sounds like to me, on the main show as a 5-minute reprieve between matches, gotten a huge pop for her, had another big moment, and then moved on, and everyone's seeing it on the main card. And they just didn't do it. Chris, before we get to the grades, was there anything else you wanted to talk about? I mean, the presentation of Wembley Stadium, obviously, look, being fair, right? They sold approximately 53,000 tickets or distributed approximately 53,000 tickets. Last year, obviously, it was 73,000 plus. Whether it was sold out or not last year is irrelevant. It was immensely impressive. I think 53 is immensely impressive. There was a bunch of bullshit out there. They couldn't have as many people in because of Taylor Swift and a setup she did. That's not true. Okay, I'm just going to tell you straight up. That's not true. They sold fewer tickets. Does that matter? To me, not in the least. Last year was a special first time ever thing. This year, they were coming back to the exact same venue. I don't want to say the same show, but the same time of year. And they sold 50,000 tickets for a stadium show. That is super effing impressive. Looking at it, did I notice that sections were tarped off that definitely could have been opened? Sight lines or not? Yes. Did I notice that there were a lot of empty seats in sections that were sold? Yes. Again, is that a criticism? Absolutely not. I said the same thing actually about SummerSlam in Cleveland. It was super cool that WWE did a stadium and sold a shitload of tickets. But guess what? There were a lot of empty seats and they did not come close to selling out SummerSlam. So it's the same thing here. But was it noticeable? Yes. Entrance, I liked that it was bigger. I didn't think it was that cool looking. And Wembley for me, while it's cool as a stadium atmosphere, it just is so cavernous that the sound really didn't carry. So there were only a couple moments really on that show where you felt like crazy explosion of energy and chanting and excitement. It was obviously the MJF Will Ospreay match. It was the main event with Swerve and Bryan Danielson. It was Mariah May and Toni Storm. And then a couple individual one-offs like Taz, Sting, some of those little moments. But for a lot of matches, even if it wasn't in reality, the crowd sounded like it was dead.
So the setup, they changed the setup. They put the stage in what's essentially the end zone instead of at midfield like they did last year. And that made it look a bit more generic stadium show, kind of, in the WWE way. But I thought it looked good. And I did not notice empty seats. There were a lot of shots, from ringside upward and all the sections you'd see, ton of fans, look great. They didn't show the stage very much because it looked like everything behind the stage was tarped off. It's kind of a different way, the way WWE does those not full stage shows. And so every stage shot would be kind of zoomed in a bit, but the stage, from what I could tell, looked pretty cool. And it was a long way down, but not like an impossibly long way down. Like sometimes we do with the WWE shows.
WrestleMania in particular.
I'm talking about like SummerSlam and Rumble, those where it's a super long way
on the floor. The long ones on the floor.
Yeah.
Got it.
It wasn't like that, so that was good. I thought the area around the ring was gigantic, and I could not figure out why. Did you notice this? Especially like when Hangman showed up. There's like so much room there between the barricade and the ring. I don't have any idea why they did it like that, but it was interesting.
I did notice it. I thought it was perhaps for some of the table match not the table match. I'm sorry, the ladder match that opened the show. And I figured there'd be other reasoning for that. They had things planned, but they never utilized the space. So,
yeah. But yeah, major credit, 50,000 tickets, whatever. Like, I couldn't believe they were going back a second time. I didn't think they could recreate that magic, so to speak. And, recreate the same thing, but still awesome. I don't care about stadium fees and all that business bull crap that WWE fans are going to mention. Part of the reason WWE hasn't run Wembley or whatever, I don't care. They put a crap ton of people in Wembley Stadium.
Yes,
for a second year in a row. It's a huge credit to the company and all of them and everything they do. And it's out, and we'll get to the future stuff too. But it's been successful, and that's good to hear. Before we get into the grade and the future stuff,
sure.
This has been a problem with all AEW pay-per-views. You gotta give us a breather between some matches.
No, they refuse.
That doesn't mean you do the WWE thing where you have 15 minutes between it or something like that. There's got to be a middle ground here. Like it's just like there's no time to catch your breath, and they don't linger on things at the end because they got to get to the next match because they do such a long card. And there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 main cards on the main card.
Matches,
Only 3 of them went over 20 minutes, so it wasn't too bad. It wasn't like we had a bunch of 30-minute matches, so I thought that was fine. But
the timing on the show, I think the timing on the main card was 4 hours flat. It was really nice. Really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. So like, I don't know if you cut a match and just give us just some, like you said, the Soraya Jamie Hayter thing would have been a great thing to do, like right before the main event or something like that.
Let me tell you this. You put Taz and Jericho on the kickoff show. Not Taz and Jericho. You put Hook and Jericho on the kickoff show. You put the Soraya and Jamie Hayter segment on the main card. It makes it a better show just simply by doing that.
Yeah. So, but again, WWE's the complete opposite direction, which is its own problem, which is 4 or 5 matches on a card and we're doing 20, 30-minute things.
It is, but it's different. I mean, you have to remember this is a pay-per-view, right? You're paying to not be given advertising. With WWE, you're still paying for it, but you're paying, $10 or less a month in most cases. So they're like, hey, we're going to supplement it with some, sponsorship, right? I think the biggest compliment I can give AEW for All In, and yes, they did overload the card with the extra 0-hour matches. None of them really matter. I mean, one of them did, but they really didn't matter that much. But the show did not go slow for me this time. The 4 hours went by pretty quick. It did not drag on like All In last year. It did not drag on like many other AEW pay-per-views have. That's a criticism that we've levied against them many times. We said they need to find a happy medium. I still think they could have cut 2 matches off the main card and made it even better. We talk about with WWE, they're giving these 5-match cards for most shows, and for bigger shows they're doing more. But for most of these shows, it's 5. It's not enough. AEW doing 10, 11, 12, too much. I think they both need, WWE needs to pick up 1, 2. AEW needs to drop 1, 2. And if they can both kind of get to that zone, it's going to be even better for the viewer. But to give AEW credit, they say you're paying $50 for the show. We want to give you something that not only is worth your $50, but gets you coming back and spending $50 again next month. And they're doing that. And that's something that a lot of promotions, and I'm not talking about wrestling, I'm talking about boxing, UFC, a lot of promotions can learn from.
Yep.
All right. So with that said, that's our full instant analysis of AEW All In. Let's move to the grades portion of this show. We will start with our pre-show expectation grades. Now, Vintage and I provided ours during the AEW All In Ultimate Preview. Again, we do Ultimate Previews ahead of every major show. And of course, for those major shows, we do episodes like this, the instant analysis. But on that Ultimate Preview, our pre-show expectation grades, Chris, I believe you were at 95 out of 100, 94 or 95, you said. In A, I was at 93 out of 100 in A minus. And in terms of our listeners, our Getting Overheads who voted and shared their pre-show expectation grades on Twitter at Getting Overcast, it was 39% A, 49% B, 9% C, 3% D or F. That averages to an 87.4 out of 100 or a B plus. So they were lower than I and far lower than you in terms of expectation going into the show. But that is where we stood. That sets the level. Chris, now that AEW All In is over, what is your final grade for this pay-per-view?
It is tough. I'm going to ultimately go A minus.
Okay.
And a 90. I love this card coming in. A lot of the matches just didn't live up to the expectation. But I love the environment. I'm a big environment atmosphere person when it comes to grading a lot of these shows. And it was really, really solid. Thought the production was great. This 2 years in a row now, AEW, they have a lot of production issues we harp on. They have nailed All In twice, both times. Their biggest show, they've hit, and that's good. And we end with one of the matches of the year with a fantastic moment. And we have and so you get a big major title change. And so a B plus just felt kind of harsh. I'm guessing that's where most people are going to end up. Maybe I just get kind of sucked into the stadium part of it all.
I think you do a little bit. I felt you were a little high on All In last year. Also, not that it wasn't great. I just felt you were a little high because it's a stadium show. You're usually a little high on WrestleMania as well for the same reason. But it's each their own. I just was sharing.
So I'm going to go with that. But actually, as I'm looking it back, not many title changes on this. We got a couple, but
the big ones got changed. It was the AEW title, the women's title, and the international title.
Yeah.
And those were the 3 that needed to be changed based on storyline. So
so we got Will Ospreay's got a belt. We got Bryan Danielson's your world champion. We got Mariah May wins your AEW. So like you establish some new things.
Right.
And ultimately, I think that worked in the end.
Trios
So,
titles also changed, by the way. It was really just the TNT,
but I don't care about
TBS.
those.
I know. TNT, TBS, and tag. And then you can count FTW also. So really most of the titles changed on the show. But yes,
Yeah,
it was those three major ones that mattered.
Yep. So I'm going to go A-.
So for me, this was as blatant of a 3-match show as I've seen in a while. And the best news is that all 3 delivered to different levels of excellence. The bad news is that it was a 10-match card. And the other 7 either for me fell below expectation or barely met them. There were positives to draw from most of the card, even some of those aforementioned 7 matches. There were a surprise or a moment, something to take a mediocre match or a mediocre booking decision and allow you to move past it without being too negative. One example of the TNT Championship, really didn't love the match. Sting came back. Pretty cool, right? The Gauntlet match, really didn't like that as much as other people clearly did. But Nigel McGuinness, Ricochet, Zack Sabre Jr., Hangman came out, went on a run. There are things you could take away from all of those things. That didn't necessarily turn those lacking matches into momentous matches. Didn't make them must watch, but it helped them. In fact, the only match from this card I think I would go back to watch ever is Bryan and Swerve, and I'll probably do it pretty soon. So with all of that said, I'm honestly right there with you, but as you kind of projected with your commentary, I'm not at an A-. I'm at a B+. I think the strongest part really carried this show to a significant degree, but you got to have more than 3 tentpole matches on a card this large to give yourself an A show. I mean, we talked about this with WrestleMania previously, right? There's some of those individual nights where there's a couple good matches and the rest is shit, or I don't want to say shit, but not as good. And you're just like, man, how do you kind of compartmentalize that, right? The way I compartmentalize it is I say, it's a really, 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 really good show, just not a great one. So I'm at a 88 out of 100, a B+. But again, I don't want to get it twisted. I loved the main event. I loved Toni Storm and Mariah May, and I really liked MJF and Will Ospreay. Just the rest of the card didn't exactly speak to the Silver King. Now, let's see where the listeners fall. Our getting overheads, 27% thought this was between an A+ to an A-. 51% said this was between an A- and a B+. 12% a B to a B-, and 10% a C+ or lower. That averages out to an 88.8 or a B+. You round up to an 89. So literally right between us, Chris.
Yeah.
90, 89, 88. And again, we're talking single digits. We're pretty much all in agreement that this was a good show, worth the $50, and certainly, something that is praiseworthy for AEW to sell or distribute 53,000 tickets for a show of this magnitude. And it is not the only one like it coming up. And we can kind of move into that unless you had any individual thoughts on my take on the show.
No, yeah, there's quite a few announcements from AEW along with the show. So let's talk about those.
Sure. So AEW is going to be hosting Grand Slam as a pay-per-view at a 52,000 seat stadium in Brisbane, Australia this February. I think the seating capacity is going to be 43,000 because of the stage setup and all that. This is going to be an extremely interesting exercise for them. East Coast of Australia, far more populous, and therefore selling tickets should be easier than, of course, what WWE just went ahead and did in Perth. At the same time, it's neither clear what kind of fan base there is, nor how many folks would consider traveling to Australia for that show. It might be interesting if AEW, going forward, focuses on big, major events as a wrestle company and maybe reduces some of its focus in other areas. I don't think anyone's ever tried that, and I don't think they're going to be giving up on monthly or let's say regular pay-per-views, but it would be pretty interesting if you were a company and you did 4 stadium shows a year and maybe only 2 other pay-per-views. And if you just packed those to capacity, I wonder what that would look like from a bottom line standpoint, profit and loss. We'll see, but I think this is immensely ambitious. I think this is actually more ambitious than Wembley Stadium last year.
Could be. I did not realize this when you said that in the stadium of the capacity. I did not had seen that. I had assumed this was just an arena show in Australia.
It's a stadium show. They're calling it
or like a tennis stadium, but it's like Arthur Ashe.
That's what I thought at first because they're calling it Grand Slam, and obviously there is an Australian Open, so it plays. But no, it's at a stadium.
That is extremely ambitious. So I hope it works. And I've always liked I always thought Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe was like a bigger thing than it could have been, a bigger thing than they made it.
Right.
I thought that would have been a really cool like home arena for big shows. Like it's not your Madison Square Garden, but like it's close. It's unique. It was like a very unique atmosphere and setup that nothing else in pro wrestling really had, especially WWE never had something quite like that. So good luck in Australia.
And we also have AEW returning to London next year, despite the fact that they're making Vintage Chris Vanini happy and holding All In back here in the United States in Texas. AEW is going to do Forbidden Door next year at this time in August in London. Now, it's a smart move, pushing that out of the U.S. and making that exchange. No location was announced, so it could be an arena. It could potentially be Craven Cottage as a larger facility. There's been a lot of talk. I'd be surprised by that. Now, to be fair, New Japan might have a stronger fan base, or at least more fans who can more easily travel to an event in the United Kingdom in London than in the United States. But at the same time, I just don't know that you can do a stadium show when you're doing a dual brand, especially because I think they're doing a Wrestle Dynasty show. I know they're doing a Wrestle Dynasty show with New Japan in January. So if you're already going to do a co-branded show in January, you're going to do another one in August. I know it's half a year away, but I don't know that you can do a stadium. So we'll see what they announce in terms of a venue. But I am glad they're going back to London because that has proven to be a strong fan base for them, and they should be getting a show every year.
AEW going international in 2025 is kind of one of the big stories here. And it's going to be interesting. I think it works. Like even TNA would always go to England and do a round, and it would always do well, and it'd always be really interesting. And that's like TNA. I think it's a cool idea to do Australia, to go back to London, but maybe not do as big of a thing. I'm excited for All In next year, which is in July, not August.
It is July,
but they will still be in London at this time of year. I still hate how close All In and All Out are, and it just appears they're never going to change that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's All Out in 2 weeks. They have not announced what's happening with All Out next year, but there are 6 weeks between All In and Forbidden Door next year. So there is time to put All Out in there. We'll see if they do. We'll see if they get rid of it. Hopefully they get rid of it. But let me tell you this, man. They're going Grand Slam in September. I don't believe there's a pay-per-view coming up next month. But then Wrestle Dream in October, Full Gear in November, World's End in December. 7 days after that, Wrestle Dynasty with New Japan in January. Then Grand Slam in Australia. And then they're taking a break before All In Texas. Maybe not a break, but they haven't announced anything after that.
Yeah, they haven't announced most of their normal.
This is a lot of events. I mean, it just is. And it continuously feels, especially when you get to the end of the year, that AEW stretches itself too thin. They're putting a lot of content out there during football season, which, I mean, it frustrates us as people who work in both industries. But even beyond that, it's tough to focus when you're doing
hard
monthly.
For Tony Khan. I mean, he works for the Jaguars.
Well, I mean, people have their own issues with that. Trust me. The fact that he spends this much time doing this, yet he has his job with the Jaguars and Fulham and everything else. But I'm just pointing out, like, that's a lot at a time of year for an organization. Look, AEW is a clear number 2 in professional wrestling. It's not even a question about it, right? This makes me feel like they might be overextending themselves to a degree, and maybe the fan base is so loyal that it just does not matter. But we do see that despite what their success was here at All In, U.S. attendance is going down and not coming back up. Ratings have taken a fall a bit, and they've met a new standard. Previously, the standard was 900,000, then 800,000, now it's 700,000. Yes, people are leaving cable. That's not the only reason for it. Point is, they have a new TV deal coming. They're going to become profitable for the first time. And it seems like they're celebrating that profitability by just throwing it all at the wall and saying, we're going to run a bunch of stadiums and we're going to sell all those tickets. And I hope that they do. but it is super freaking ambitious because pretty much what they're saying is we're going to be going and competing with WWE as a live event business. And I think they've been real successful competing with WWE as a television product, as an alternative. But to do this many stadiums and this many major events, that is costly. And if they're not getting site fees for these, then they're not going to be making money on these events the way WWE does. And I don't know how sustainable that is.
So AEW did 5 pay-per-views in 2022. It did 8 in 2023. It is doing 9 in all of 2024. So those are going up.
And a 10th 7 days later after that, yeah.
Yeah, and then one at the beginning of January, which I don't know if that counts as New Japan or not or whatever.
I think it kind of, I mean, it's in Japan, and I think they're going to lead that one, whereas AEW leads Forbidden Door. So it's an NJPW show, but it's still, they're involved in it.
You know, long term, I would just say with AEW, just go back to the small arenas. It works so much better on TV, I think. I think what
for
they
TV
did
especially.
What they did in Arlington, specifically for TV, what they did in Arlington for a month, I really wish I could have gotten out there. It's an hour away, and it was football preseason. I couldn't get out there, but that seemed to be a big success. Like, you don't need to do the biggest arenas for everything, especially for television. So, but hopefully that TV deal gets hammered out. I know I saw Tony Khan doing interviews with a Max hat on.
Yeah.
It'd be great. It would be great if we can do AEW pay-per-views on Max in the future. So, you know, things depending on the metrics, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. AEW's not going anywhere.
No.
Which is good.
No.
You want to have big time homes for people who don't fit in WWE. It's better for everybody. And I'm glad that All In, to me, I think was a very, very successful show for the second year in a row. So,
unquestionably a success. Yeah. And setting them off on a good foot with some real exciting new champions and hopefully storylines coming out of this, moving into the final few months of 2024 and into what is clearly going to be a very hopeful and potentially prosperous 2025. So, folks, that wraps up this instant analysis edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We just broke down every single damn thing that happened at All In on Sunday. On the way out, allow the Silver King to remind you that we will be back next week with a loaded set of programming. On Tuesday, we will have your WWE Bash in Berlin Ultimate Preview, and we will break down everything that happened in WWE this past week. On Thursday, we'll have your NXT No Mercy Ultimate Preview, and we'll break down everything that happened across NXT and AEW. On Saturday night, probably a few hours delayed after the end of the show, we will have your WWE Bash in Berlin Instant Analysis. And then Sunday night, we will have your NXT No Mercy Instant Analysis. So a 4-show week coming up on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. And the timing is perfect because it just so happens to be week 1 of the college football season and the final week before the start of the NFL season. So on the way out, folks, you know what it's all about.
It's all about the fight.
Head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. You can also vote in those polls that we talked about. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. And please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do too, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, instant reactions to the major shows, and exclusive news posts. Again, that is buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Thanks once again to Vintage Chris Vanini for joining this program and instantly analyzing everything that happened across AEW All In on Sunday night. For him, this is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.